As I mentioned multiple times in my previous videos, intermediate stage training is the most grueling stage out of all stages. And while many fitness channels have mentioned the copious number of challenges intermediate lifters have to face on their own journey, they generally lump all intermediates together instead of dividing them further. Whereas in reality, as the intermediate category covers a very long range, and due to the bridging nature of this particular category, the issues that an early intermediate who has just graduated from beginner category has to face will be vastly different from the issues that a late intermediate who is about to enter advanced category has to face. And to make it even worse, perhaps the most confusing and most deceiving part is when you're in the middle of this category. You are not an early intermediate, you are not a late intermediate, you are an intermediate lifter. And today, I'm going to address the specific predicament you are going to face as an intermediate lifter. So first things first, what is my definition of an intermediate lifter? Well, as usual, I'm still going to use fat free mass index as the most direct measurement. In my opinion, when your fat free mass index is between 21 and 22, you are halfway on the intermediate bridge. And to use myself as an example for illustration again, this is the photo of me when I became an intermediate lifter in December 2022. I was 69 kilos at 10% body fat. That gives you a fat free mass index of 21.5, just right in the middle of 21 to 22 range. And I had been training consistently for 16 months. And if you have watched my previous bulking series, you will know that there is one term that I've coined myself, the dwindling newbie gains. Well, the first challenge you will face as an intermediate lifter is this. Just like beginners who have to kiss goodbye their sweet newbie gains, you have to kiss goodbye your dwindling newbie gains. Now it is grinding time, real grinding time. Be prepared to buckle down and grind day in, day out to squeeze the progress out of your body. And experience did not lie. Compared to the first 4 kilos of muscle mass I made before December 2022, the remaining 3 kilos of muscle mass I made during my remaining intermediate stage took me a substantial amount of more effort. Not only did I have to increase my training frequency, but I also had to increase my session length from less than 1 hour to more than 1 hour. So, although I said before that you can call the whole intermediate stage training as the intermediate plateau, the time you become an intermediate lifter is where the intermediate plateau truly starts. And if you think your early intermediate training is tough enough, well, get ready to take your training up a notch, if not a few notches. And since we have mentioned bulking, we might as well go with the second challenge for intermediates. Actually, this challenge is closely related to the first one, because once your dwindling newbie gains are gone, you have to face the inevitability of bulking if you want to put on a substantial amount of more muscle. And the idea of going on a bulk is very distasteful to many people. A lot of people, myself included, started their fitness journey in order to lose the extra weight in the first place. And they may very well, for the first time in their entire life, trimmed down and managed to reveal the six-pack abs that were only previously existing in their dreams. Now, there's no question that this brand new lean physique with sexy six-pack abs is a very addictive look to them. And to ask them to go on a bulk to gain more muscle, but also gain more body fat and look puffy again as they were before is surely going to be a very big challenge. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and tell you that I was not addicted to this lean, sexy six-pack look myself. This photo was taken back in January 2022. For the very first time in my entire life, I was able to see my six-pack abs clearly, and just look at how stupidly I was smiling back then. For a guy that was always troubled by weight issues and constantly floating at 35% body fat previously, You have no idea how important the six-pack abs would mean to me. So from a retrospective perspective, I can completely understand why so many people are obsessed with being lean and maintaining their six-pack abs. But unfortunately, if you want to put on more muscle mass, then being an intermediate is probably the longest you can stretch without sacrificing your abs. The photo you saw in December 2022, that was the last time I managed to maintain my six-pack abs. I tried to grow more muscle at maintenance calories, but plateaued hard. The body just would not put on more muscle as it did before. After that, I had to go on a long-term sustainable bulk, which resulted in this puffy look in August 2023. But I brought up my weight from 69 kilos to 75 kilos. Then I cut it down to 72 kilos to bring body fat to similar range as I was at 69 kilos. So if you're already an intermediate lifter and you're still a fanboy of Jeff Cavalier or Greg Doucette, believing in body recomposition or main gaining, it is time to outgrow yourself. Stop being obsessed with six-pack abs. Embrace the bulk or stay as intermediate forever. Since we have talked about outgrowing yourself, the third challenge an intermediate lifter has to face is you have to expand your fitness knowledge reserve. Now, I mentioned that I'm not a Jeff Cavalier fanboy anymore. In fact, I'm not a fanboy of anyone anymore. But I have no shame to admit that I built my own fitness knowledge foundation on the information provided by AthleanX YouTube channel. And I still maintain to this day that if there's only one fitness channel one should follow as a beginner guidance, it will be AthleanX, because it just covers the basics of weight training and nutrition well. But by the time you are an intermediate lifter, you should dispose of the idea of only following one person implicitly, even that person is your mentor. And here, I'm going to play a clip from my previous video, Hacking into the Ultimate Hypertrophy Code, Early Intermediate, where I've used Bruce Lee as the best example to explain why it is important for you to do this. And perhaps no one can be a better example to explain this critical mental shift than the legend himself, Bruce Lee. It is well documented that he was firstly mentored by Ip Man to study Wing Chun of Kung Fu style, and that was the foundation of his martial art knowledge. However, it is also well documented that he later on practiced with so many other martial artists, absorbed their concepts and assimilated their styles, and created his very own system in the end, Jeet Kune Do. That is why he famously said this quote, "Adapt what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own." It is necessary for Bruce Lee to follow Ip Man at the very beginning, just like it is necessary for you to follow a trustworthy source at your beginner phase. But it was even more so necessary for Bruce Lee to jump out of his mentor's sphere, to study from others, create his own system, and become a legend himself. Just like it is more necessary for you to discover new channels, absorb new ideas, and create your own thinking. This critical mental shift, the earlier it happens after beginner phase, the better. And to use myself as example again, by the time I was a late intermediate, apart from AthleanX as my fitness knowledge foundation, I have at least absorbed information from Greg Doucette, Mark Sisson, Ted Naiman, Gabriel Lyon, John Meadows, Jay Cutler, Hani Rambot, Milos Sashev, and Lane Norton, and possibly more people, and significantly expanded my fitness knowledge reserve. And all the extra fitness knowledge outside the realm of AthleanX is crucial for me to progress from an intermediate to a late intermediate. So it might sound like a cliche to say this, but before you arm your body with more muscle, you need to arm your brain with more knowledge. The fourth challenge that comes along with expanding your fitness knowledge reserve is how to expand your exercise selections. Previously, you were able to progress very well with only foundational compound movements like pull-ups, dips, back squat, and deadlift. But now very likely, those foundational movements can no longer cover everything you require. One reason is that you don't have a very good mind-muscle connection in some of the compound movements. For example, you may be able to bang out 10 plus bodyweight pull-ups, but you just cannot feel your lower lats. In this instance, you may want to consider including the single-hand T-bar rows in your exercise selections. Another reason is that excessive fatigue may start to rear its ugly head with some compound movements. For example, you may be able to deadlift 3 or 4 or 5 plates, but that will just prevent you from training hard in the rest of your sessions. In this instance, you may want to switch to Romanian deadlift and only use 2 plates instead of 4 plates. Another reason is that the law of diminishing returns starts to kick in if you still only focus on foundational compound movements. It is getting harder and harder to put more weight on these movements. It is becoming more and more dangerous to lifting heavier weights, and it is becoming more and more difficult to put on more muscle by only doing these compound movements. Of course, there will be other reasons to include more exercise selections in your programming, but the point here is minimalist approach may serve you very well before and may be the most effective way for you to progress from a beginner to an intermediate. But now, you will be the biggest roadblock for you if you want to keep progressing. And it takes courage to give up the approach you are familiar with and try something entirely new. And that brings us to the fifth challenge, which is the one that ties all the aforementioned challenges together. Do you have the courage to stop your inertial thinking? Because everything that you have learned and practiced previously, whether it is the assumed training intensity, or growing muscle and losing body fat at the same time, or taking fitness advice from one trustworthy source implicitly, or following a minimalist approach, they may all have worked very well previously, but when you become an intermediate lifter, they will all start to fail. And it is extremely hard to stop the mental inertia because to a lot of people, stopping the inertial thinking can be interpreted as asking you to negate what you have achieved so far. And to some extent, it is a valid point because past experiences are usually the best predictor for future successes. However, it is equally important to realize that in order to keep your progress, you have to evolve with the situation and recognize that the things that got you so far in the past may not be the things that can keep you going in the future. As the intermediate lifter is literally the midpoint of your whole journey. If you still clinch the first half of your journey and refuse to evolve, you may never have the chance to go on the second half, let alone be able to see the true genetic potential of yourself in one day. Let's see, guys, the predicament for intermediate lifters. Evolve. Or otherwise, the best end result for you will be a generic ceiling height physique even after years of training. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to know what generic ceiling height means, you can click on this link and find out yourself. It may be good enough to some people, but if you want to look jacked, I guarantee you, generic ceiling height is definitely not enough. Thank you for your support, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.